A town is a human settlement larger than a village but smaller than a city. The size definition for what constitutes a town varies considerably in different parts of the world. Origin and use. The word town shares an origin with the German word Zorn, the Dutch word Tuin, and the Old Norse tun. The German word Zorn comes closest to the original meaning of the word, a fence of any material. An early borrowing from Celtic dunum, cf. Old Irish dun, Welsh din fortress, fortified place, camp, diners city. In English and Dutch, the meaning of the word took on the sense of the space which these fences enclosed. In England, a town was a small city that could not afford or was not allowed to build walls or other larger fortifications, and built a palisade or stockade instead. In the Netherlands, this space was a garden, more specifically those of the wealthy, which had a high fence or a wall around them. In Old Norse tun means a place between farmhouses, and is still used in a similar meaning in modern Norwegian. In Old English and early and Middle Scots, the word tun, etc. could refer to kinds of settlements as diverse as agricultural estates and holdings, partly picking up the Norse sense at one end of the scale, to fortified municipality at the other. If there was any distinction between tun and burg as claimed by some, it did not last in practice as burghs and tuns developed. For example, Edinburgh, or Edinburgh, was built around a fort and eventually came to have a defensive wall. In some cases, town is an alternate name for city, or village. Sometimes, the word town is short for township. In general, today towns can be differentiated from townships, villages, or hamlets on the basis of their economic character, in that most of a town's population will tend to derive their living from manufacturing industry, commerce, and public services rather than primary industry such as agriculture or related activities. A place's population size is not a reliable determinant of urban character. In many areas of the world, as in India at least until recent times, a large village might contain several times as many people as a small town. In the United Kingdom, there are historical cities that are far smaller than the larger towns. The modern phenomenon of extensive suburban growth, satellite urban development, and migration of city dwellers to villages have further complicated the definition of towns, creating communities urban in their economic and cultural characteristics but lacking other characteristics of urban localities. Some forms of non-rural settlement, such as temporary mining locations, may be clearly non-rural, but have at best a questionable claim to be called a town. Towns often exist as distinct governmental units, with legally defined borders and some or all of the appurtenances of local government. In the United States these are referred to as incorporated towns. In other cases the town lacks its own governance and is said to be unincorporated. Note that the existence of an unincorporated town may be legally set forth through other means, as through zoning districts. In the case of some planned communities, the town exists legally in the form of covenants on the properties within the town. The United States Census identifies many census-designated places by the names of unincorporated towns which lie within them. However, those CDPs typically include rural and suburban areas and even surrounding villages and other towns. The distinction between a town and a city similarly depends on the approach adopted. A city may strictly be an administrative entity which has been granted that designation by law, but in informal usage, the term is also used to denote an urban locality of a particular size or importance, whereas a medieval city may have possessed as few as 10,000 inhabitants. Today some consider an urban place of fewer than 100,000 as a town, even though there are many officially designated cities that are much smaller than that. Age of town scheme. Australian geographer Thomas Griffith Taylor proposed a classification of towns based on their age and pattern of land use. He identified 5 types of town: infantile towns, with no clear zoning; juvenile towns, which have developed an area of shops; adolescent towns, where factories have started to appear; early mature towns, with a separate area of high-class housing; mature towns, with defined industrial, commercial and various types of residential area. By country, Australia. In Australia, towns or urban centre localities are commonly understood to be those centres of population not formally declared to be cities and having a population in excess of about 200 people. centers too small to be called towns are generally understood to be a township. In addition, some local government entities are officially styled as towns in Queensland, Western Australia and the Northern Territory, and before the statewide amalgamations of the 1990s in Victoria some local government entities were styled as towns, but now towns are only localities that contain an urban centre with a population greater than 200. Austria. In Austria, designations are similar to those in Germany with a trichotomy in Gemeinde, Markt, Gemeinde, and Stadt, which translates to community, market community, and city. Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bosnians and Herzegovinians do not have different words to express town and city. The word they use to refer to either is grad. A village is called selo. Bulgaria. In Bulgaria the Council of Ministers defines what constitutes a settlement, while the President of Bulgaria grants each settlement its title. In 2005 the requirement that villages that wish to classify themselves as town must have a social and technical infrastructure, as well as a population of no less than 3,500 persons. For resort settlements the requirements are lower with the population needing to be no less than 1,000 persons but infrastructure requirements remain. Canada. The legal definition of a town in Canada varies by province or territory, as each has jurisdiction over defining and legislating towns, cities and other types of municipal organization within its own boundaries. The province of Quebec is unique in that it makes no distinction under law between towns and cities. There is no intermediate level in French between village and ville, so both are combined under the single legal status of ville. While an informal preference may exist among English speakers as to whether any individual ville is commonly referred to as a city or as a town, no distinction and no objective legal criteria exist to make such a distinction under law. Chile. In Chile, towns are defined by the National Statistics Institute as an urban entity with a population from 2001 to 5,000 or an area with a population from 1001 to 2000 and an established economic activity. Czech Republic. The Czech language, similarly to languages of all surrounding countries, doesn't differentiate between city and town. The word for both is město. On administrative level a distinction is made between towns and statutory cities. There are 25 statutory cities defined by Law No. 128/2000 Col, in addition to Prague, the capital city which is a de facto statutory city. Denmark. In Denmark, in many contexts no distinction is made between city, town, and village. All three translate as by. In more specific use, for small villages and hamlets the word landsby is used, while the Danish equivalent of English city is storby. For formal purposes, urban areas having at least 200 inhabitants are counted as by. Historically some towns held various privileges, the most important of which was the right to hold market. They were administered separately from the rural areas in both fiscal, military and legal matters. Such towns are known as KBSTAD, and they retain the exclusive right to the title even after the last vestiges of their privileges vanish through the reform of the local administration carried through in 1970. France. From an administrative standpoint, the smallest level of local authorities are all called communes. However, some laws do treat these authorities differently based on the population and specific rules apply to the three main cities Paris, Lyon and Marseille. For historical reasons, 6 communes in the Meuse d'Art copyright department still exist as independent entities despite having no inhabitant at all. For statistical purposes, the National Statistical Institute operates a distinction between urban areas with fewer than 2,000 inhabitants and bigger communes, the latter being called villes. Smaller settlements are usually called villages. The French term to mean town is bourg, but in fact, the French do not really distinguish between towns and cities which are all commonly called villes. Germany. Germans do not, in general, differentiate between city and town. The German word for both is Stadt as it is in many other languages that do not make any difference between the Anglo-Saxon concepts. However, the International Statistics Conference of 1887 defined different sizes of Stadt, based on their population size, as follows: Landstadt, Kleinstadt, Mittelstadt and Großstadt. the term Großstadt may be translated as city. In addition, Germans may speak of Millionenstadt, a city with over 1 million inhabitants. In Germany also the historical importance, the centrality and the population density of an urban place might be taken as characteristics of a city. Many settlements became a start by being awarded a Stadtrecht in medieval times already. The word for a village, as a smaller settlement, is Dorf. In some German states, the words Marktflecken or Flecken designate a town-like residential community between village and city. The current local government organization is subject to state law of a state, and the related denomination of a specific settlement may differ from its common designation with common local government. Designations in different states are as diverse as, for example, in Australian states and territories, and differ from state to state. Greece and Cyprus. Greeks do not have different words to express town and city. The word they use to say both is I-Euro-I-Y-I. Though sometimes they use the word I per mil I-1/4 I-Y-Euro-I-I to refer to a town. For Greeks, a town is a human settlement with a population of 2,000 to 9,999. If a settlement has a lower population, it is considered a village. For the cities, Greeks use the word par-li, whereas for bigger cities with a population above 1 million, they usually use another name, I-1/4 I-Y-Euro-I-I, in English metropolis. In the Greek-speaking world only Athens and Salonika can be described as metropolises. Hong Kong. Hong Kong started developing new towns in the 1950s, to accommodate booming populations. The very first new towns included Tsuen Wan and Kwun Tong. In the late 1960s and the 1970s, another stage of new town development was launched. 9 new towns have been developed so far. Land use is carefully planned and development provides plenty of room for public housing projects. Rail transport is usually available at a later stage. The first towns are Sha Tin, Tsuen Wan, Tuen Mun and Sung Kwon O. Tuen Mun was intended to be self-reliant, but was not successful and turned into a bedroom community like the other new towns. More recent developments are Tinshui and North Lantau. Hungary. In Hungary there is no official distinction between a city and a town. In Hungary, a village can gain the status of város, if it meets a set of diverse conditions for quality of life and development of certain public services and utilities. Every year the Minister of Internal Affairs selects candidates from a committee-screened list of applicants, whom the President of Republic usually affirms by issuing a bill of towns rank to them. Since being a town carries extra fiscal support from the government, many relatively small villages try to win the status of városi rang nowadays. Before the fall of communism in 1990, Hungarian villages under 10,000 residents were not allowed to become towns. Recently some settlements as small as 2,500 souls have received the rank of town, and meeting the conditions of development is often disregarded to quickly elevate larger villages into towns. As of middle 2013, there are 346 towns in Hungary, encompassing some 69% of the entire population. Towns of more than 50,000 people are able to gain the status of Magyarjoga város, which allows them to maintain a higher degree of services. As of middle 2013, there are only 23 such towns in Hungary. Iceland. Ireland. The Local Government Act 2001 provides that from January 1, 2002, within the county in which they are situated and of which they form part, there continue to be such other local government areas as are set out in Schedule 6 which, in the case of the areas set out in Chapter 1 of Part 1 of that schedule, shall be known as boroughs, and, in the case of the areas set out in Chapter 2 of Part 1 and Part 2 of that schedule, shall be known as towns, and in this Act a reference to a town shall include a reference to a borough. These provisions affect the replacement of the boroughs, towns and urban districts which existed before then. Similar reforms in the nomenclature of local authorities are affected by Section 11 Part 17 of the Act. Includes provision, qualified electors of a town having a population of at least 7,500 as ascertained at the last preceding census or such other figure as the minister may from time to time prescribe by regulations, and not having a town council, may make a proposal in accordance with paragraph for the establishment of such a council and contains provisions enabling the establishment of new town councils and provisions enabling the dissolution of existing or new town councils in certain circumstances. The reference to town having a population of at least 7,500 as ascertained at the last preceding census hands much of the power relating to defining what is in fact a town over to the Central Statistics Office, and their criteria are published as part of each census. Planning and Development Act 2000, another reference to the census and its role in determining what is or is not a town for some administrative purposes. In the Planning and Development Act 2000, a local area plan shall be made in respect of an area which I is designated as a town in the most recent census of population, other than a town designated as a suburb or environs in that census, has a population in excess of 2,000, and is situated within the functional area of a planning authority which is a county council. Central Statistics Office criteria, these are set out in full at 2006 census appendices. In short, they speak of towns with legally defined boundaries, and the remaining 664 as census towns, defined by themselves since 1971 as a cluster of 50 or more occupied dwellings in which within a distance of 800 meters there is a nucleus of 30 occupied houses on both sides of the road or 20 occupied houses on one side of the road. There is also a 200-meter criterion for determining whether a house is part of a census town. India. In India, under most state laws, no village or settlement can be classified as a town unless its population crosses 20,000 inhabitants. On the basis of population and other issues, the state government notifies a larger community as a notified area, and its administration is under the locally elected Notified Area Committee. A settlement over 20,000 population would be classified, with a charter from the state government, as a town, with a town area committee. Some laws distinguish only towns and villages from each other, but by usage, settlement with larger populations, such as those having a municipal committee or municipal corporation, would be called cities. The recent census of India classified all settlements above 5,000 population subject to some other rules as urban areas for the sake of census. In the Census of India 2001, the definition of urban area adopted is as follows: all statutory places with a municipality, corporation, cantonment board or notified town area committee, etc. A place satisfying the following three criteria simultaneously: a minimum population of 5,000. At least 75% of male working population engaged in non-agricultural pursuits. And a density of population of at least 400 per km. 2, Iran. In contemporary Persian texts, no distinction is made between city and town. Both translate as Shah. In older Persian texts, the Arabic word Kasabi was used for a town. However, in recent 50 years, this word has become obsolete. There is a word in Persian which is used for special sort of satellite townships and city neighborhoods. It is sharak. Another smaller type of town or neighborhood in a big city is called Kai. Sharak and Kai each have their different legal definitions. Large cities such as Tehran, Mashhad, Isfahan, Tabriz, etc., which have millions of populations, are referred to as Kalan Sharu Mooma Euro Oeuo plus or minus. The pace in which different large villages have gained city status in Iran shows a dramatic increase in the last 2 decades. Bigger cities and towns usually are centers of a township. Shahrastan itself is a subdivision of Ostano terahertz cubed ohm. Israel, modern Hebrew, does provide a word for the concept of a town, aera, derived from the biblical word for city. However, the term aera is normally used only to describe towns in foreign countries, that is, urban areas of limited population, particularly when the speaker is attempting to evoke nostalgic or romantic attitudes. The term is also used to describe Shtayl, a pre-Holocaust Eastern European Jewish town. Within Israel, established urban areas are always referred to as cities regardless of their actual size. Israeli law does not define any nomenclature for distinction between urban areas based on size or any other factor, meaning that all urban settlements in Israel are legally referred to as cities. The exception to the above is the term Eretz Pituach, which is applied to certain cities in Israel based on the reasons for their establishment. These cities, created during the earlier decades of Israeli independence, were designed primarily to serve as commercial and transportation hubs, connecting smaller agricultural settlements in the northern and southern regions of the country to the major urban areas of the coastal and central regions. Some of these development towns have since grown to a comparatively large size, and yet are still referred to as development towns, particularly when the speaker wishes to emphasize their socio-economic status. Nonetheless, they are rarely referred to simply as towns. When referring to one directly, it will either be called a development town, or a city, depending on context. Italy. Although Italian provides different words for city, town and village, no legal definitions exist as to how settlements must be classified. Administratively, both towns and cities are ruled as communes, while villages might be subdivisions of the former. Generally, in everyday speech, a town is larger or more populated than a village and smaller than a city. Various cities together may form a metropolitan area. A city can also be a culturally, economically or politically prominent community with respect to surrounding towns. Moreover, a city can be such by presidential decree. A town, in contrast, can be an inhabited place which would elsewhere be styled a city, but has not received any official recognition. Remarkable exceptions do exist. For instance, Bassano del Grappa was given the status of città in 1760 by Francesco Loredan's Dogal decree and has since then carried this title. Also, the Italian word for town must not be confused with the Italian word for country-nation. Japan. In Japan, city status was traditionally reserved for only a few particularly large settlements. Over time, however, the necessary conditions to be a city have been watered down, and today the only loose rules that apply are having a population over 50,000 and over 60% of the population in a city center. In recent times, many small villages and towns have merged in order to form a city despite seeming geographically to be just a collection of villages. The distinction between towns and villages is largely unwritten and purely one of population size when the settlement was founded, with villages having under 10,000 and towns 10,000 to 50,000. Latvia. In Latvia, towns and cities are indiscriminately called pilsēta in singular form. The name is a contraction of two Latvian words, pils and zārta, making it very obvious what is meant by the word, what is situated between the castle and the castle fence. However, a city can be called liela pilsēta in reference to its size. A village is called smauts or ciems in Latvian. Lithuania. In Lithuania, towns are named miestelis. Cities are named miestas. Villages are named kaimas. Manors are called vienkiemes. Metropolis is called ditmiestis. Netherlands. In the Netherlands, no distinction is made between city and town. Both translate as stad. Before 1848 there was a legal distinction between stad and non-stad parts of the country, but the word no longer has any legal significance. About 220 places got stadsrechten, and are still so called for historical and traditional reasons, though the word is also used for large urban areas that never got such rights. For example, The Hague, the third largest settlement of the country, never received official city rights, but is undoubtedly regarded as a city. The contrastive word for a village as a smaller settlement is dorp. New Zealand. In New Zealand, a town is a built-up area that is not large enough to be considered a city. Historically, this definition corresponded to a population of between approximately 1,000 and 20,000. Towns have no independent legal existence, being administered simply as built-up parts of districts, or, in some cases, of cities. New Zealand's towns vary greatly in size and importance, ranging from small rural service centres to significant regional centres such as Blenheim and Taupo. Typically, once a town reaches a population of somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 people, it will begin to be informally regarded as a city. One who regards a settlement as too small to be a town will typically call it a township, or village. Poland. Similarly to Germany, in Poland there is no official distinction between a city and a town. The word for both is miasto. Town status is conferred by administrative decree. Some settlements remain villages even though they have a larger population than many smaller towns. Portugal, like other Iberian cultures, in Portugal there is a traditional distinction between towns and cities. Similarly, although these areas are not defined under the constitution, and have no political function, they are defined by law, and a town must have, at least 3,000 inhabitants, at least half of these services, health unit, pharmacy, cultural center, public transportation network, post office, commercial food and drinking establishments, primary school and/or bank office. In this context, the town or city is subordinate to the local authority civil parish or municipality, in comparison to the North American context, where they have political functions. In special cases, some villages may be granted the status of town if they possess historical, cultural or architectonic importance. The Portuguese urban settlements heraldry reflects the difference between towns and cities, with the coat of arms of a town bearing a crown with 4 towers, while the coat of arms of a city bears a crown with 5 towers. This difference between towns and cities is still in use in other Portuguese-speaking countries, but in Brazil is no longer in use. Romania. In Romania there is no official distinction between a city and a town. Cities and towns in Romania can have the status either of ora municipiu, conferred to large urban areas, or only ora to smaller urban localities. Some settlements remain villages even though they have a larger population than other smaller towns. Russia. Unlike English, the Russian language does not distinguish the terms city and town. Both are translated as th cubed th 3/4 n euro th 3/4 th. Occasionally the term th cubed th 3/4 n euro th 3/4 th is applied to urban-type settlements as well, even though the status of those is not the same as that of a city-town proper. In Russia, the criteria an inhabited locality needs to meet in order to be granted city-town status vary in different federal subjects. In general, to qualify for this status, an inhabited locality should have more than 12,000 inhabitants and the occupation of no less than 85% of inhabitants must be other than agriculture. However, inhabited localities which were previously granted the city-town status but no longer meet the criteria can still retain the status for historical reasons. Sweden. The Swedish language does not differentiate between towns and cities in the English sense of the words. Both words are commonly translated as stad. The term tar currency taught is used for an urban area or a locality, which however is a statistical rather than an administrative concept and encompasses densely settled villages with only 200 inhabitants as well as the major cities. Before 1971, 132 larger municipalities in Sweden enjoyed special royal charters as stad instead of kommun. But since 1971 all municipalities are officially defined as kommun, thus making no legal difference between, for instance, Stockholm and a small countryside municipality. However, every urban area that was a stad before 1971 is still called stad in daily speech, and since the 1980s, 14 of these municipalities brand themselves as stad again, although it has no legal or administrative significance, as they still have referred to themselves as kommun in all legal documentation. Today, Statistics Sweden defines a stad as an urban area of at least 10,000 inhabitants. In the Swedish language the term for a major city is stad, but there is no clear definition as to when a stad should be called a storstad. Most Swedes would only call Stockholm, Gothenburg and Malmö paragraphs största currencystäder, that is major cities. Ukraine. There is no difference in the Ukrainian language between the notions of town and city. Both these words are translated into Ukrainian as th 1/4 nnn th 3/4. The smallest population of a city of Ukraine can be about 10,000. Cities-towns should be distinguished from urban-type settlements, which, although urban in nature, do not have a city status. As a rule, the population of an urban-type settlement is between 2,000 and 10,000. United Kingdom. England and Wales. In England and Wales, a town traditionally was a settlement which had a charter to hold a market or fair and therefore became a market town. Market towns were distinguished from villages in that they were the economic hub of a surrounding area, and were usually larger and had more facilities. In modern everyday usage, a town is a settlement that is larger than a village but smaller than a city. The concept is subjective, but a town is generally held to be a settlement with a population bigger than about 7,000 and smaller than about 90,000. In parallel with popular usage, however, there are many technical and official definitions of what constitutes a town, to which various interested parties cling. In modern official usage, the term town is employed either for old market towns, or for settlements which have a town council, or for settlements which elsewhere would be classed a city, but which do not have the legal right to call themselves such. Any parish council can decide to describe itself as a town council, but this will usually only apply to the smallest towns. Not all settlements which are commonly described as towns have a town council, or borough council. In fact, because of many successive changes to the structure of local government, there are now few large towns which are represented by a body closely related to their historic borough council. These days, a smaller town will usually be part of a local authority which covers several towns. And where a larger town is the seat of a local authority, the authority will usually cover a much wider area than the town itself. Additionally, there are new towns, which were created during the 20th century, such as Basildon, Redditch and Telford. Milton Keynes was designed to be a new city, but legally it is still a town despite its size. Some settlements which describe themselves as towns are smaller than some large villages. The status of a city is reserved for places that have letters patent entitling them to the name, historically associated with the possession of a cathedral. Some large municipalities are legally boroughs but not cities, whereas some cities are quite small such as Ely or St David's for instance. The city of Brighton and Hove was created from the two former towns and some surrounding villages, and within the city the correct term for the former distinct entities is somewhat unclear. It appears that a city may become a town, though perhaps only through administrative error. Rochester has been a city for centuries but, when in 1998 the Medway district was created, a bureaucratic blunder meant that Rochester lost its official city status and is now technically a town. It is often thought that towns with bishops' seats rank automatically as cities. However, Chelmsford was until recently a town despite being the seat of the Diocese of Chelmsford-St Asaph, which is the seat of the Diocese of St Asaph, also only recently became a city. In reality, the pre-qualification of having a cathedral of the established Church of England, and the formally established Church in Wales or Church of Ireland, ceased to apply from 1888. The word town can also be used as a general term for urban areas, including cities and in a few cases, districts within cities. In this usage, a city is a type of town. A large one, with a certain status. For example, Greater London is sometimes referred to colloquially as London Town. Camden Town and Somers Town are districts of London, as New Town is a district of Edinburgh, actually the Georgian centre. Scotland. A town in Scotland has no specific legal meaning and can refer to a mere collection of buildings, not all of which might be inhabited, or to an inhabited area of any size which is not otherwise described in terms such as city, burg, etc. Many locations of greatly different size will be encountered with a name ending with town, ton, ton etc. A burg is the Scots term for a town or a municipality. They were highly autonomous units of local government from at least the 12th century until their abolition in 1975, when a new regional structure of local government was introduced across the country. Usually based upon a town, they had a municipal corporation and certain rights, such as a degree of self-governance and representation in the Sovereign Parliament of Scotland adjourned in 1707. The term no longer describes units of local government, although various claims are made from time to time that the legislation used was not competent to change the status of the royal burghs described below. The status is now chiefly ceremonial, but various functions have been inherited by current councils which might only apply within the area previously served by a burgh. In consequence, a burgh can still exist and might still be signed as such by the current local authority. It should be noted that the word burgh is generally not used as a synonym for town or city in everyday speech, but is reserved mostly for government and administrative purposes. Historically, the most important burghs were royal burghs, followed by burghs of regality and burghs of barony. Some newer settlements were only designated as police burghs from the 19th century onward, a classification which also applies to most of the older burghs. United States. In the United States of America, the term town refers to an area of population distinct from others in some meaningful dimension, typically population or type of government. The characteristic that distinguishes a town from another type of populated place a city, borough, village, or township, for example can differ from state to state. In some states, a town is an incorporated municipality. That is, one with a charter received from the state, similar to a city, while in others, a town is unincorporated. In some instances, the term town refers to a small incorporated municipality of less than 10,000 people, while in others a town can be significantly larger. Some states do not use the term town at all, while in others the term has no official meaning and is used informally to refer to a populated place, of any size, whether incorporated or unincorporated. Small-town life has been a major theme in American literature, especially stories of rejection by young people leaving for the metropolis. Since the use of the term varies considerably by state, individual usages are presented in the following sections. Alabama. In Alabama, the legal use of the terms town and city are based on population. A municipality with a population of 2,000 or more is a city, while less than 2,000 is a town. For legislative purposes, municipalities are divided into 8 classes based on population. Class 8 includes all towns, plus cities with populations of less than 6,000. Arizona. In Arizona, the terms town and city are largely interchangeable. A community may incorporate under either a town or a city organization with no regard to population or other restrictions according to Arizona law. Cities may function under slightly differing governmental systems, such as the option to organize a district system for city governments, but largely retain the same powers as towns. Arizona law also allows for the consolidation of neighboring towns and the unification of a city and a town, but makes no provision for the joining of 2 adjacent cities. California. In California, the words town and city are synonymous by law. There are 2 types of cities in California, charter and general law. Cities organized as charter cities derive their authority from a charter that they draft and file with the state, and which, among other things, states the municipality's name as city of, or town of. Government Code sections 34,500 to 34,504 applies to cities organized as general law cities, which differ from charter cities in that they do not have charters but instead operate with the powers conferred them by the pertinent sections of the Government Code. Like charter cities, general law cities may incorporate as city of, or town of. Some cities change their minds as to how they want to be called. The sign in front of the municipal offices in Los Gatos, California, for example, reads City of Los Gatos, but the words engraved on the building above the front entrance when the City Hall was built read Town of Los Gatos. There are also signs at the municipal corporation limit, some of which welcome visitors to the City of Los Gatos while older, adjacent signs welcome people to the Town of Los Gatos. Meanwhile, the village does not exist in California as a municipal corporation. Instead, the word town is commonly used to indicate any unincorporated community that might otherwise be known as an unincorporated village. Additionally, some people may still use the word town as shorthand for township, which is not an incorporated municipality but an administrative division of a county. Hawaii. The Hawaiian island of Oahu has various communities that may be referred to as towns. However, the entire island is lumped as a single incorporated city, the city and county of Honolulu. The towns on Oahu are merely unincorporated census-designated places. Illinois. In Illinois, the word town has been used both to denote a subdivision of a county called a township, and to denote a form of municipality similar to a village, in that it is generally governed by a president and trustees rather than a mayor. Under the current Illinois Municipal Code, An incorporated or unincorporated town may choose to incorporate as a city or as a village, but other forms of incorporation are no longer allowed. Maryland, while generally a town is usually considered a smaller entity than a city, legally they are exactly the same as far as Maryland law is concerned. With the exception of the independent city of Baltimore, in Maryland, there is no difference between a city and a town. It is simply part of the name that was chosen to designate an incorporated municipality. It's essentially the same as a corporate business entity choosing to have a name with incorporated, or with corporation. Both terms mean the same thing. Nevada. In Nevada, a town has a form of government, but is not considered to be incorporated. It generally provides a limited range of services, such as land use planning and recreation, while leaving most services to the county. Many communities have found this semi-incorporated status attractive. The state has only 20 incorporated cities, and towns as large as Paradise, home of the Las Vegas Strip. Most county seats are also towns, not cities. New England. In the 6 New England states, a town is a municipality and a more important unit than the county. In Connecticut, Rhode Island and 7 out of 14 counties in Massachusetts, in fact, counties only exist as map divisions and have no legal functions. In the other 3 states, counties are primarily judicial districts, with other functions primarily in New Hampshire and Vermont. In all 6, towns perform functions that in most states would be county functions. The defining feature of a New England town, as opposed to a city, is that a town meeting and a board of selectmen serve as the main form of government for a town, while cities are run by a mayor and a city council. For example, Brookline, Massachusetts is a town, even though it is fairly urban, because of its form of government. New Jersey. A town in the context of New Jersey local government refers to one of 5 types and one of 11 forms of municipal government. While town is often used as a shorthand to refer to a township, the two are not the same. The Town Act of 1895 allowed any municipality or area with a population exceeding 5,000 to become a town through a petition and referendum process. Under the 1895 Act, a newly incorporated town was divided into at least 3 wards, with 2 councilmen per ward serving staggered 2-year terms, and 1 councilman at large, who also served a 2-year term. The councilman at large served as chairman of the town council. The Town Act of 1988 completely revised the town form of government and applied to all towns incorporated under the Town Act of 1895 and to those incorporated by a special charter granted by the legislature prior to 1875. Under the 1988 Act, the mayor is also the councilman at large, serving a term of 2 years, unless increased to 3 years by a petition and referendum process. The council under the Town Act of 1988 consists of 8 members serving staggered 2-year terms with 2 elected from each of 4 wards. 1 councilman from each ward is up for election each year. Towns with different structures predating the 1988 Act may retain those features unless changed by a petition and referendum process. 2 new provisions were added in 1991 to the statutes governing towns. First, a petition and referendum process was created whereby the voters can require that the mayor and town council be elected to 4-year terms of office. The second new provision defines the election procedure in towns with wards. The mayor in a town chairs the town council and heads the municipal government. The mayor may both vote on legislation before council and veto ordinances. A veto may be overridden by a vote of 2/3 of all the members of the council. The council may enact an ordinance to delegate all or a portion of the executive responsibilities of the town to a municipal administrator. 15 New Jersey municipalities currently have a type of town, 9 of which operate under the town form of government. New York. In New York, a town is similarly a division of a county, but with less importance than in New England. Of some importance, a town provides a closer level of governance than its enclosing county, providing almost all municipal services to unincorporated areas, called hamlets, and selected services to incorporated areas, called villages. In New York, a town typically contains a number of such hamlets and villages. However, due to their independent nature, Incorporated villages may exist in 2 towns or even 2 counties. Everyone in New York who does not live in an Indian reservation or a city lives in a town and possibly in one of the town's hamlets or villages. In New York, town is essentially short for township. North Carolina, in North Carolina, all cities, towns, and villages are incorporated as municipalities. According to the North Carolina League of Municipalities, there is no legal distinction between a city, town, or village. It is a matter of preference of the local government. Some North Carolina cities have populations as small as 1,000 residents, while some towns, such as Cary, have populations of greater than 100,000. Pennsylvania, in Pennsylvania, there is only one municipality which is incorporated as a town, Bloomsburg. Most of the rest of the state is incorporated as townships, which function in much the same way as the towns of New York or New England, although they may have different forms of government. Utah. In Utah, the legal use of the terms town and city is based on population. A municipality with a population of 1,000 or more is a city, while less than 1,000 is a town. In addition, cities are divided into 5 separate classes based on population. Utah code governing the requirements for cities and town, including the requirements for each separate class of city, can be found at the Utah Legislature website. Virginia. In Virginia, a town is an incorporated municipality similar to a city. But while cities are by Virginia law independent of counties, towns are contained within counties. Washington. A town in the state of Washington is a municipality that has a population of less than 1,500 at incorporation, however an existing town can reorganize as a code city. Town government authority is limited relative to cities, the other main classification of municipalities in the state. As of 2012, most municipalities in Washington are cities. Wyoming. Wyoming statute indicates towns are incorporated municipalities with populations of less than 4,000. Municipalities of 4,000 or more residents are considered first-class cities. Vietnam. See also. Notes. References: Australian Bureau of Statistics, Australian Standard Geographical Classification 2005, external links. Open site regional contains information about towns in numerous countries. Geopolisa Research Group, University of Paris Diderot, France. Access to Geopolis database.